Okay, so we will be bouncing this Pokeball. All right. First things first is let's adjust our camera so that it's taller, so we could actually bounce this thing. So I'm gonna go 2000 by, let's say, 2400. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the sidebar. I'm gonna press N. Let me click on screencast so you could see what's happening, and then go to view and make sure camera is lock camera to view. So now we can manipulate our camera here like so. Okay. Um, well, a little bit more of an angle. All right, then I will probably select the floor right here. Select that edge, move it up so that end of the world is not shown. Okay, and that's our file right here. Okay, so I'm going to switch to the animation tab. Click this to preview. Click this to preview as well. Okay, I'm going to press number 1 here so that it's up front. So the plane here is the floor and background, so we're just going to call that the floor. Okay, I'm going to add a new filter option here. So I'm going to click this little funnel looking thing. I'm going to click on the arrow for selectability. I'm going to uncheck selectability on the floor so we don't accidentally select it. Okay, same thing with the light right here. Okay, and then the camera as well. Okay, so we're not seeing the light in camera, so it's just the ball is all we could actually select. Okay, I'm gonna press T as in tool, so this one opens up, and I'm gonna open my move tool right here. All right, so what we're gonna do is to simply just cycle the animation of this ball, kind of just bouncing kind of up and down. Uh, let me readjust this a little bit. I need more height on the ball. So let me just kind of zoom out a little bit. Okay, and then reselect the floor. And kind of move this up. There we go. All right. Can't select that. All right, so here we go. We're back to this. So what we want to do is just kind of cycle this and kind of bouncing, okay? And then we'll do this in multiple stages. So the first lesson is just to make it into, animate the principles of animation with a bouncing ball, but cycle it in about 24 frames and using just transform tools, okay? So transform tools only, and then we'll rig it with a bone, and so we can kind of eliminate all the counter animation that we have to do. Okay, so this one is just for bouncing it. So what I'll do here first is kind of, and we're gonna make the Pokeball into a rubbery Pokeball, so we will squash it. So if I go to my scale tool here, as you can see already, if we want to squash it, it's no longer squashing where it's supposed to squash, right? Right there. It's supposed to squash at the bottom. Okay. So right here, what we want to do is delegate the squashing into a parent, right? But that's for the next lesson. So this is all going to be what it's all transformed. So the first thing we need to do is we need to change the pivot point of this ball, so it's not at its center and it's at the bottom right there. So this is a lesson in changing where the point of rotation. Okay, so right now the point of rotation, it's in the center, and the point of squashing is also in the center, which is wrong because you're supposed to squash based on the point of impact, right? So the first thing we need to do in order to change the pivot point of this is to go to edit mode and to simply select part of the object that's at the bottom. Okay, So I selected that, which is basically that bottom point right there. Okay. So if you go to the front, you could see that that's the bottom right there. Okay. Then we just have to tell Blender that we need to change the cursor to the selected one. So I'm in edit mode and point mode here. I'm going to go to mesh, snap, and then go cursor to selected. Okay, now the 3D cursor is there. It didn't change the pivot point. It's still at the center, but the cursor is now at the bottom. So now when we go to object mode with the ball selected, and I go object, set origin. Origin is what we call pivot point or rotation point or scale point in Blender. We're just going to simply go here, origin to 3D cursor. So basically this is the origin, go to the 3D cursor at the bottom. So now when I squash this, it's squashing where it's supposed to be. All right? It's not keeping its volume, so we're going to have to do some animation with that. All right, so now that this one is set, I can simply just go here and then save this as a different name. So we're going to go like Pokeball origin bottom. Okay, I'm being specific with the names because so that you know which one is which. Okay, so this one's good to go. All right, so now let's change our timeline. We're just going to do a 1 second bounce with this. All right, so let's go to frame 25. So it's only showing 1 to 25, which is 24 frames. And I'm going to simply expand this so we see more of it. Okay. All right, so let's see screencast also so you can see what's happening. All right, there it is. Okay, so we just want the ball on top on frame 1 and frame 25, and then it lands on the bottom. Okay, so let's just first do that. Let's not worry about the squashing yet. Let's just go with the positioning. All right, so let's say I'm basing it on what I could see on the camera here. Okay, let's say up that high right there. Okay, so what is the original position of the ball when it before I lifted it? So I'm going to click undo. Okay, I'm going to press N. Let's take a look at the item value. It says it's on the z-axis -1. So remember that one. So that's when it's on the floor, right? -1 on z. All right, so we're going to move this up on frame 1. That should be the height. We don't want to cut the camera right there. That's probably right there would be good. Okay. So this height right now, it's 6.9. Let's make that into a whole number, make it 7. All right, so we're making it easier on ourselves here. Okay, so z-axis is the up and down movement. Y is front and back. Then X, of course, you already know, it's left and right. I'm going to zero this out too. I think I moved that a little bit, so I'm just going to go 0, 0, and 7 in there. Okay, and then I'm going to save this. It's now ready for animation with the pivot point at the bottom. Okay, so in animation in Blender, to animate, you press the letter I, as in ice cream. Then it will ask you, hey, what do you want to animate? Okay, so you can either animate location, rotation, scale, so on and so forth. But when you do that, when you press I and click on location, which is movement, it keyframes all X, Y, Z. So we only want to animate z-axis, right? So when you get X and Y, there's no movement. Actually, there's nothing going on in there because there's no value, but you get static keys. But let's make it cleaner. I'm going to click undo. So instead of pressing I to make a keyframe, we're going to just right-click the axis that we want to animate, and we're going to click on Insert Single Keyframe. When you select the top right here, which is I, it'll do the previous one while you get XYZ keyframe. Okay, so what we're doing here is simply doing the 4 steps in animation. Select the object you want to animate. That's the first one, right? Next one is position the time where you want the animation to be. Third step is to give value to the transform, okay, which is the position. And then last, step 4 is to right click, keyframe it. Okay, so step 1, we select the object we want to animate. Done. Step 2, position the time. So we want this ball up on frame 1. So there it is. It's on frame 1. Okay. Step 3, add the value or position where you position your object where it needs to be. We want it up here on frame 1, which is 7 meters along the z-axis right there. Step 4, right click to keyframe. Single keyframe. There it is. So this is now keyframed here. It's not going to do anything because it's just simply on top right there. Okay. And we're just kind of cycling this animation. So it goes from top to bottom, then going up. Okay. So on frame 25, it goes up here. So here it cycles the animation. So if I do the 4 steps again, select the object, move the time. So this is frame 25. We want the ball to be exactly where it's at. So the value should be the same at 7. And then we right click this, insert single keyframe. We now have 2 keyframes here. And the ball doesn't do anything. It just stays on top. Okay. So if we go here on frame 12, okay, or frame 13, okay, we can set the ball down here so that we can then do some animation. So I don't know if you guys remember the value here on Z. It's on -1. Okay, so I selected the object. I moved the time to frame 13. I gave it a value of -1, which is when it's on the ground. Then right here, I'm going to go insert single keyframe. And then if we watch this animation now, there it is. There's the bounds, but there's something wrong with the bounds. Okay, pretty bad actually. It's using the principles of animation, slow in and slow out, but we don't want that, right? So on a bouncing ball, you have movements, specific movements, right? So we want the ball to be slow when it's kind of falling, and then it picks up speed. It goes really fast when it hits the ground, and then once it hits the ground, it bounces up really fast, and then it kind of slows down before it hits the top. Okay, so looking at this, if we change our dope sheet now to the graph editor right here, so let me show you where that is. There's the icon right there. I click that graph editor. We can kind of see along the z-axis, right, location z, that this is our function curve. So let me select all that and then press dot on the numpad to kind of zoom in. Okay, so what's happening at the top right here, it's slow. Okay, and this function curve right here is just the opposite of that one in look. This is also slow. So we want it slow, then fast, fast, slow. Well, what it's doing now, it's slow, 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 slow. Everything's slow. So all you have to do is change the trajectory of this to kind of curve it like this. So from this U shape, you want to make it into an inverted U shape, okay, in order for it to become fast. So that's how you do it. Is you just simply, if you want to change the speed, you simply reverse the look of the function curve. Okay, so if I select this key right here in the center and I press V as in victory, I'm going to change that to free. Okay, because if it's not set to free, if I click one of the handles and then press G to move it, as you can see the other one, it's locked in. So what's going to happen is that you're not going to have independent handles. So in order to get independent handles, I'm going to select that key right there, which is frame 13, right? I'm going to press V as in victory, click free. So now when I press when I select one of the keys, I'm in handles, and I press G, and then I just reverse the look of it. All right, so let's go right so, and this one also. Now let's play the animation. All right, so now it's bouncing correctly. All right, simply by reversing the function curve. All right, so now let's say we want to make sure that this ball is going to squash. All right, so we're going to change the property of the Pokeball. Right now, the Pokeball is what? Kind of like a ping pong ball, right? Or a weird rigid ball. Okay, so, and I'm gonna stop the playback. Space bars to change your playback. So I'm gonna give it a little bit of a, so it's much faster on its way up here. So I kind of changed the trajectory a little bit. There we go. So it's just when it hits, and then it goes up really quick, and then before it could reach the very top, it slows down, and before it drops, it slows down as well. Okay, so now what we want is the ball to squash. The ball is on the ground now for just one frame, so that's not enough time to squash anything. So what can we do? What we can do here is make the ball stay on the ground longer. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to our dope sheet. Okay, so frame 13 is at the center, right? It's at the bottom right there. So instead of reanimating stuff, let's use the power of the dope sheet or the graph editor. So we know for a fact that this key, the ball is on the ground, but we cannot squash the ball in one frame. There's not enough time. So what we'll do is we're going to make the ball stay longer here. So we're going to give it maybe 3 frames each. So what I'm going to do here, while the frame 13 is selected, which is the ball on the ground, I'm going to click Shift D to duplicate that key, move that mouse, and then move it to frame 10. Okay, so what happened is that now the key, the animation, the ball is on the ground at 10, and it's doing some weird stuff here because, again, we got to control our function curve, right? And then what else can we do? We have to do the opposite, right? So this is where we're going to squash in, and then on frame 16 we're going to squash out. So I'm going to duplicate frame 10 again and drag it all the way to 16. So now this ball is on the ground from 10, 13, and 16. But when you play it, it's doing a double bounce in there. The reason for that is this. It's our function curve. Let's go to the graph editor. Let's take a look. So there shouldn't be any activity. Oops, sorry. Press select all. There shouldn't be any activity from frame 10 to 16. Okay, but since it inherited the function curve edit that we did when we copied it, hence it kind of looked like that. So what can we do here? We need to make sure that there's no curvature here, right? So one thing to do is you can select this and then just kind of, if you can flatten this manually, that will do the job. But there's, of course, there's a better way of doing this than just simply eyeballing it like this. But this would work as well, right? So, but there's no guarantee there that that thing is straight. So how do we kind of fix that? First, we don't really need this middle position on 13 now, right? Because it's on the ground on 10 and 16. We don't really need this, so we can just simply delete this. I'm going to press X and then delete keyframe. Okay, so now let's take a look at the handle. If you look here, it's not really straight. Okay, it has this kind of, I can eyeball it like there. It'll work, but how do you make sure that this thing is flat on the ground? Okay, one thing to do is first you can select both keys right there and then just change them. If I press V again, right, and then you can use here, you can put vector. Okay, when you click on vector, it forces the angle of both handles to be flat here. Okay, now that's kind of hard to see because I think I did a too good of a job flattening those. So let's say they're kind of crooked like that. Okay, and then I go press V and then vector. As you can see, it made this thing flat. However, we lost some of the quickness of the before the ball drops and after it bounces back up, right? So we simply need to make changes here, kind of reposition those so that it has a fast movement again. So let's take a look. It's going to look funky because keep in mind, it's still doing the correct bounce, but we're not seeing the squashing. So you're seeing that kind of gap right there that it just sits on the ground. Okay. So now let's introduce new animations. Okay, so which is squashing. But one of the principles of animation is appeal and solid drawing, which you need to keep the volume of your object. Okay, so it's not really keeping the volume here because we're learning how to animate using the fundamentals. All right, so let's take a look at what's happening. So I'm gonna kind of make this into like a 3D shape. I mean 3D angle right here. Okay, I'm gonna switch to the scale tool. As you can see, our scale right now is XYZ 111, right? So when it first hits the ground, we have to animate this to be, hey, be a circle. And we're not adding exaggeration here yet. Keep that in mind, okay? We're not exaggerating yet, okay? Like this, we didn't. This ball is still dropping like a around here, like a perfect sphere. Okay, so we're just doing the squashing right now. Those are going to be on a separate lesson where we add exaggeration. Okay, so right here we need to tell Blender, hey, keep the ball XYZ all axis, make it look like a sphere. Okay, so this is where it's appropriate to press I and then scale instead right here. So you don't have to right click each XYZ and keyframe them. You kind of save time, right? So we know for a fact it's going to squash on 13 and squash back up on 16. So frame 16 also, we want to tell Blender, hey, here, make this into a perfect sphere again. Okay, so we're going to press I on 16 and animate scale. So if we watch the animation, nothing really happened. All we did is tell Blender, so let me go to our dope sheet here. Okay, so we now have Z location, right? So first Z is 1, 10, 16, and 25. Up, down, so up, down, down, up, right? So with scaling now, we're telling it, hey, on frame 10, we're just keyframing you so that XYZ, you're 111. And then when you're squashing out on 16, you're also 111. So now let's go to frame 13, which is the center, and animate the individual axis, right? And we're going to kind of fake the keeping volume here, okay? So if I squash this down on 13 along the Z-axis, let's say that much, okay? So I went with, let's say, 0.6. Okay, 0.6. Because we're on Euler, so just kind of ignore the z-axis here because we're on Euler XYZ. Okay, so whatever value it's being affected right there, okay, which is the y-axis. Okay, should we switch to? Yeah, just leave it on global. So we're just gonna go y on this one, and then I'm gonna go here, insert single keyframe. So when we watch the animation, there it is, but we're not getting the side volume here, right? So now we need to make sure that it's also expanding on the side. So if I grab this here, which is X, okay, we want to kind of keep the volume, so we're going to keep it at, if we go 0.6, let's kind of do like hokey math here. I'm going to put 1.4. So whatever the value we took out in there, we're adding it to that. Okay. And then on Z also, which is this one, I'm going to go 1.4. All right. It's not perfect science, folks, but we're making it into a pancake. So we're squashing it down. We're also expanding it on the side and front and back. So 1.4, 0.6, 1.4. Okay. On those two on frame 13. So I will insert keyframe on X and Z. Okay. So now when we watch our animation, there it is. It's doing the squash. So now the ball is bouncing as if the Pokeball is very rubbery. Okay? So what can we do with the function curve on the squash? Well, there's some things that you can do, but I think it's squashing fast enough. We might not need to do anything, but if we take a look at we're going to hide the Z location for now, so we're only seeing XYZ here. Okay, so right here it has the slow handle. Okay, so it's squashing fairly slow. Well, not slow, it's still happening pretty fast. But if you can manipulate this, if you want, so that the squashing goes a little bit faster, but I doubt you'll see a whole lot of difference because we're only bouncing this in, I mean squashing it, sorry, go back to the dope sheet, from 10 to 16. Okay, so there's that. So principles of animation here being used. Slow in, slow out, and then we have our squash in, squash out. We kept the volume, so that's appeal and solid drawing. Okay, and then we set the well, kind of poor staging here because you could see the cut right there, so I can fix that later. You know, we kind of, that's staging right there. We're centering the ball, but we're also making sure that we have borders here, so when it goes up it doesn't go all the way to the uh, top of the screen. It's not really a cycle, folks. We're only watching it from 1 to 25, and the loop playback is giving it that cycled look, right? But we'll learn how to cycle this later on when we animate it for to give it rotation, and then separate the uh, transform animations for different parts. Okay, so I'm going to end the demo right here with the Pokeball just squash and stretching and slow in and out using the graph editor.